promoting scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
We've signed a climate convention on the importance of economic instruments and free markets. Were included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration. Let me be clear on one fundamental point. The United States fully intends to be the world's preeminent leader in protecting the global environment.
Coming up, Technocracy News. And greetings from Technocracy News and Trends. I'm Patrick Wood, Editor-in-Chief. Today is June 18, 2019. Well, there's been several states around the country that have been experimenting with self-driving autonomous vehicles. Most notably, we've had Uber, we've had Lyft, we've had Google's Waymo car, and they've been testing them extensively, actually, in Arizona, as well as California and Utah, and Florida is one of those states, and Florida becomes now the first state in the nation to allow self-driving cars to drive about without a driver behind the wheel. Now in Arizona, we see all these self-driving cars scooting around town, but they always have a safety driver, just a fallback driver, behind the wheel in case something goes wrong and that driver could take over. But now in Florida, they removed that requirement to have a driving person behind the wheel, and cars will be shooting around the area without anybody in person in control. And so the article says Florida will allow autonomous vehicles to operate on public roads without a human driver starting next month under a new law signed by Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican. The Florida, as we know, has already positioned itself as a leader for AV testing. The state has been allowing companies to test on some public roads and has authorized autonomous shuttles for use in Orlando. The new law will put Florida on a par with other states that have passed progressive laws to encourage automakers and tech startups to bring AV testing. Arizona, California, Utah, Pennsylvania have all pushed policy to make it easier for AVs to operate on public roads. Given the immense interest in AV technology and the potential for driverless cars to remake mobility, it makes sense for states to try to put themselves on the front line. And indeed, Florida has. Arizona is probably right behind them. It's also noteworthy that the federal government has pretty much taken a hands-off approach to setting rules for AVs, leaving most decisions up to the state and local governments. We've also seen in other articles here on the pages of Technocracy News and Trends that autonomous vehicles are not causing the effect that they originally intended. That was to decrease congestion within urban areas especially. In fact, just the opposite has happened. Congestion is greater now in normally congested areas than it ever has been before. And drivers that run taxis and other types of shuttle services have noted this quite visibly across the nation, that shared rides and soon-to-be autonomous vehicles will indeed increase congestion, increase pollution, and increase actually the number of rides that people are taking. Well, we have a major story today about the Pope, Pope Francis. We find him to be thoroughly deceived on the green agenda of sustainable development and global warming especially. He said recently, doomsday predictions can no longer be dismissed. Well, Pope Francis is apparently jumping in bed with the United Nations, throwing all the weight of the Catholic Church towards UN policy and dogma. He said on Friday that carbon pricing is essential to stem global warming. Carbon pricing, that's technocracy, by the way, his clearest statement yet in support of penalizing polluters. And he appealed to climate change deniers to listen to science. Well, I'm afraid the Pope wouldn't know science if it ran up and bit him. But here's the interesting thing. In the same breath that he appeals to climate deniers, he says that polluters should be punished, penalized. Well, that was Al Gore's thought once upon a time, that deniers should be punished. In an address to energy executives at the end of a two-day meeting, he also called for, quote, open, transparent, science-based, and standardized reporting of climate risk and a radical energy transition away from carbon to save the planet. Carbon pricing via taxes or emissions trading schemes is used by many governments to make energy consumers pay for the cost of using fossil fuels that contribute to global warming and to spur investment in low-carbon technology. The Vatican said attendees of the closed-door meeting and its Academy of Sciences, a follow-up to 1 year ago, included the CEOs of Royal Dutch Shell, Eni, BP, Repsol, ConocoPhillips, Chevron, ExxonMobil, and executives of investment funds. Father John Jenkins, president of the U.S. University of Notre Dame, which organized the meeting, he said, collectively, these leaders will influence the planet's future, perhaps more than any in the world. A small group of demonstrators gathered outside the Vatican gate. One held a sign reading, "Dear oil CEOs, think of your children." Francis, who has made many calls for environmental protection and has clashed over climate change with leaders such as U.S. President Donald Trump, said the ecological crisis, quote, threatens the very future of the human family. He criticized those who, like Trump, doubt the science that shows human activity is causing the earth to heat up. He said, quote, for too long, we have collectively failed to listen to the fruits of scientific analysis, and doomsday predictions can no longer be met with irony or disdain. He says solutions must be rooted in the best scientific research available today. Well, I don't know where he's getting his scientific research from, but certainly not from legitimate scientists. And I'll repeat the article that I posted yesterday on Technocracy News and Trends called Extensive Anthology That Refutes Man-Made Global Warming. There's over 150 articles and videos in that article that would keep you busy for hours reading what top scientists have to say about global warming and climate change. Not in favor of it, but those who are debunking it, saying that it's nonsense, it's bad science, and it's harming the planet, not saving it. And well, lastly, we look at big tech. Big tech like Facebook and Twitter, Google, created a world that has been embroiled in chaos, certainly for the last 2 or 3 years, with massive censorship, massive conflict over how so-called fake news will be censored. There's very little transparency, if any. Once somebody is banned from one of these platforms, you're simply out of the game. People complain about it. People shake their fist at the companies, but they don't get unbanned, and they don't get restored necessarily. If they do get restored, it's just the luck of the draw. Well, this is the industry that has been self-regulating from the very start, from day one. Companies like Facebook and Twitter, neither have had any regulation on them whatsoever. They've had every opportunity to adjust their behavior to be transparent and fair and reasonable. But instead of doing that, they've chosen to be reckless, greedy, and they've also revealed that they have exceedingly bad judgment on how to handle many situations that come up with their social media. Eric Schmidt, the former chairman of Google and chairman of Alphabet, he's since retired, by the way, just recently, he said that big tech should be completely self-regulated. In other words, we don't need federal regulation. We simply need you to leave us alone, and we will self-regulate ourselves. This is insanity, because why would anybody trust them to self-regulation today when they've been self-regulating ever since they started, and they've made a colossal mess out of society? I don't know, but that's what they're asking for. I hope Congress has a backbone on this and doesn't allow this self-regulation to continue as it is today. And I hope somebody will step in and put some sense into these people's heads. They need to be responsible citizens of our nation. They live here. They make their money off of our people, off of our country. They're living in the freest country still in the world in order to do it. And as a group, they have virtually destroyed the fabric of our nation. It's the goose that laid the golden egg for them, isn't it? Well, they need to wise up, and they need to start taking responsibility for their own actions. And I say the time is now to do that. I think the government has a perfect opportunity to step in and make some waves for big tech, at least, to cause them to do things that would create responsibility and transparency in the industry, and to quit finger pointing, blaming everybody else for their troubles. Well, that's it for today. I'm Patrick Wood For Technocracy News and Trends, have a great day.